Hello, thank you all for coming today. My name is Brenna MacDonald, and I am a current graduate assistant with the Health and Wellness Department, and I am just about to finish up my first year of my master's degree. So today, my background is in exercise, and today we're going to talk about exercising as you age. You might have noticed that as you get to be an older age, you cannot always do the same activities as you could before. So that's really what we're going to break into today, and we'll talk a lot more about. Basic outline of what we're going to go through today. We'll talk about the basics of exercise. We'll talk about the recommended physical activity guidelines for everyone as a whole. And then we'll also talk about the physiological changes and then how to modify your exercise with it as you reach each age point. And I kind of broke it down into decades for this as well. Just a disclaimer here. When I say, for example, 40-year-olds, I know that not every 40-year-old will be in the same place. You might be a very active one. This might be your first time pursuing exercise. So not every 40-year-old or 50 or 60 will be in the same physical place. This is just going to be a general blanket guideline for people in that age bracket and when these changes are shown to start to have occurred. So to start, just some exercise precautions. Things that, especially if you've not been exercising before this presentation, maybe this will super inspire you and you'll want to go to the gym right away today. Just a few things that I'd like to clear up before we do start with that. Number one, you want to consult a doctor, really, especially if this is your first time with physical activity. You want to make sure you talk to your general physician before doing any of this to make sure you don't have any extreme health concerns that this could be a bad idea for. Another one, exercise must be regular. So I don't know how many of us are victims of I worked out once and then didn't reach the gym again for another 2 to 3 months. That's not necessarily going to get any of the results that we want out of that one exercise. Exercise is, I will refer to it today as a stress to the body. It's a good stress, but it is a stress nonetheless. So you definitely have to apply that stressor multiple times. And when that body sees that same stressor, it will adapt itself to be able to handle it the next time that it sees that, which is why you really need to make that exercise regular. Another one that I see a lot, exercise should progress over time. So a lot of people tend to stick with the same workout and do it multiple times per week and do that same workout for many years. Because exercise is a stress and our body will adapt to be able to better handle that stress, you need to vary up that stress and progress it. So essentially, if I keep doing the same 30 minutes on the elliptical with the same resistance, everything for all of my life, that will no longer be a big challenge to my body and it won't stimulate any change. So we definitely need to find a way to progress, which we'll talk about a lot today, to make sure that we are still applying that stimulus to change your body. Another one that we have, exercise routine should be varied. Just as you want to progress it and step up in exercise, you also want to change up what you're doing. So this will go hand in hand with that too, but this is mostly it is for the physical change up, but it's also for your mental sanity as well. It's really hard to do the same workout every single time. And this is just going to provide a variety of things for you to do so that it doesn't feel so stale and you don't feel like you don't have to keep going and doing the same exact thing every time you go. Last one on there, we have exercise should be performed in short, intensive bursts. So I often get asked the question, is it better for me to do one, hour and a half or 2 hour-long session on a Monday and then not for the rest of the week? Or is it better to do, a couple half-hour sessions throughout the week? I and most of the research I've read would tend to recommend that you do the more often shorter bouts. That's going to help you just get that more regular stress that we have too. Okay, so before we reach those specific age groups, we have a few big things that happen when we do age. Number one, the word looks a lot scarier than it is sarcopenia. So sarcopenia just means muscle loss. And this is something that happens naturally with age. Our body is still in the fight or flight, trying to survive. That's always the end goal. And so when it reaches a certain age, the body is no longer going to signal myself to keep growing muscle, which we'll talk about again in a little bit. But know that that's what I mean by that. Second, hormonal changes. These you've probably seen more of and are more aware of. But essentially your body, just as it's going to start to signal decreasing that muscle mass and making you stronger to survive in nature, there are going to be hormones that do this and that coincide and go hand in hand with this. So the first one on there, your metabolism slows down. This is probably the most common one that people complain about and know that it happens. Number 2, you decrease your protein synthesis rate. So that can be changed with exercise. Each of these can. But essentially, when my body is trying to get stronger, I will upregulate or I will increase my protein synthesis. This is me holding up the sign that says, hey, body, we need to get stronger. When you're with age, if I'm just living a sedentary life, if I don't do anything to stimulate that, I will start to naturally downgrade that protein synthesis and stop making more muscle. Last one in that little section is a decrease of HGH, which stands for human growth hormone, testosterone, and insulin. So each of these are hormones that signify or signal your body to get bigger and stronger. There's a reason when I say testosterone, you probably have that picture in your head of the big, huge muscle guy in the gym with the tank top on and massive arms. There's a reason that that stereotype is associated with testosterone, because this, along with the other 2 hormones listed, are the hormones that tell my body that they want to make bigger muscles, that I need to be stronger to survive. So you're going to start to produce less of that, again, if you live a sedentary life. And then under that, you'll see bone density decreases. So just as my body experiences sarcopenia, or that decrease in muscle mass, it's also going to start to decrease the strength of my bones. Not necessarily that your body starts to attack bone that you already have, but your body's constantly rebuilding itself. And at this age that we'll talk about later, as you get older, your body is going to stop signaling to keep making bones stronger. So this is at that sedentary lifestyle, but as you reach that age, it doesn't necessarily, it's not that you're suddenly going to be weak, but you will not be continually making your bones stronger as you do in your younger age. Finally, changes in reflexes and coordination. This is more as you get up there and you start to worry about people falling. This is what we're talking about. You get a little bit less coordinated in general everyday activities like balance, bending over to pick things up. You feel less stable. This is another common thing that happens with age. So before we dive into specific age groups, these are just your general, for all people, physical activity guidelines. So there are many types of exercise. For today, we are going to separate the exercise into 2 main categories. On the left, you'll see is the cardiorespiratory exercise. This is working your heart. This is your aerobic system. So for this is the ACSM, or American College of Sports Medicine. They have recommendations for adults to have 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week. They do change those if your exercise is more intense. And if you think you fit in that category, I recommend you check out their website. They also say this should gradually progress, just like we talked about, and vary this exercise as well. The other column is going to be resistance exercise. So this is traditionally what you think of for weight training. This is going to be your strengthening exercises. For this, the ACSM recommends that you train each major muscle group 2 to 3 days per week, and you vary up those exercises and equipment. For this, we're not talking super maximal heavy weight. You just have to do a moderate to light intensity. We're talking about 2 to 4 sets of each exercise. All of the research that I have read says that anything less than 2 sets of an exercise really isn't as effective or doesn't stimulate that change. So you definitely want to do 2 or more for those exercises. As far as repetitions, you can attack different goals with different rep ranges, and this is one of the ways that we can vary up that exercise. But if you were in the 8 to 12 range, you'd be getting more of a strength and power adaptation. If you're looking at 10 to 15 repetitions, you're looking a little bit more at what we call hypertrophy or muscle growth to endurance. And then 15 to 20, anything greater than that 15 mark, is going to be muscular endurance. So these reach different goals. You don't have to pick one of these and stick with it for life. These are more of a way that you can vary it as well, as we talked about in the beginning. And then finally, you want to wait at least 48 hours in between resistance training exercises. This is especially if you haven't been training before. But that day in between at least gives you some time for your body to recover. So when I lift weights, I don't get stronger that minute, that same day. It's in the recovery process. And so that is very vital to you gaining strength and muscle mass is to give yourself that chance to regenerate and increase that protein synthesis. So to start the changes of age, at the 30 years of age, you won't necessarily see all of these changes popping up right away. You don't really notice them, but this is what I like to call the prevention years. So what you do at this age especially is going to affect you later on in your life. So here are the changes that will start to happen are decreases in muscle mass and resting metabolism. Now when I say muscle mass and resting metabolism, these pretty much go hand in hand. The more muscle I have, the more energy it takes to move my body, to exist in life. So my metabolism is going to be higher because it takes more energy to use all of that muscle. The lower muscle mass I have, the same, the more my muscle metabolism will slow down. This is why as we age and we have less muscle mass, you also see my metabolism start to slow. So at this time, you'll start to see that metabolism. Your bodies are requiring more, not less. You're requiring fewer calories to get through the same activities that you would have when you were younger, because you do have that decrease in muscle mass. Now, when I say this, you didn't suddenly lose 5 pounds of muscle, but this is when your body just stops sending out that signal to say, we need to get stronger. And this is with the sedentary lifestyle. Men, this is when your body's going to start to say, we don't have to produce as much testosterone anymore. Let's calm down on that. Then finally, you'll see that osteoporosis risk. This isn't the age that you're worried about falling and breaking a hip, but what you do at this point is going to predict how your bone health will be later on in your adult years. So this is where those first red flags pop up. How do we combat this with exercise? Your goals for 30 years of age is going to be that preventative program like I was talking about. So this is definitely a good idea to start strength training. This will increase your muscle mass and metabolic conditioning. Again, those two go hand in hand. And it's also going to, most importantly, with that osteoporosis risk we talked about, improve your bone strength. So when I resistance train, I will both be increasing that muscle mass and thereby my resting metabolism. And I will also be strengthening my bones because your bones need to be strong to support that muscle mass as well. So for this, we recommend a variety of weight-bearing activities. By weight-bearing, I mean if you're standing, you have to support yourself against the ground for at least 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week. So it doesn't have to be a super long session. You just want to get that stimulus again, 30 minutes and you can be done for strength training. Then cardio, because you want to keep that heart healthy, you want to keep your aerobic fitness up as well, at least 2 to 3 times per week. Now, this is a lot of times, and we talked about that 48 hours in between, especially if I have been exercising regularly, it wouldn't be a bad idea to, let's say I'm lifting 3 times a week. I could lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then do my aerobic or cardio exercise in between those days. So cardio might be Tuesday, Thursday. This would allow my body to move a little bit more again. I get that calorie burn, and also it helps me recover, and I'm not affecting that protein synthesis from the resistance training bouts. Moving on to 40 years of age, here we're breaking it down a little bit more by gender. So women around 45 years old, bone loss begins to increase around 1 to 2% per year. Again, I'm not suddenly going to start chipping off my bones. They're not wearing away. But it's just that body is sending less and less of that signal at this age to strengthen up my bones. Also, the metabolism changes. This is the big one we start to complain about, where all of a sudden my genes don't fit the same, or I have this area that's troubling me. We'll talk a little bit more about why that happens. Men, here you also have that bone density change, but as in most areas of nature, it tends to favor you guys. So you, instead of the 1 to 2% for women, you have about 0.5 to 1% of decreases in bone density. And that's from 45 to 55 years of age. We start to see that testosterone lower just a little bit more, and that will also affect your bone loss as well. So both estrogen and testosterone do affect our bone density, and so those will be playing in at this stage of life. With that lower testosterone, you're looking at 5 to 8% of muscle mass as well. Now that sounds a lot scarier than it is. We have a lot more muscle mass than you think, so 5% isn't a huge decrease. But just know that if I weren't to do any exercise, that would be the rate that we're looking at. Goals for this age are to preserve strength and fight belly fat. So to keep my metabolic rate high, I want to work out to preserve that lean muscle mass. So as I increase my resistance training and I increase my muscle mass, I will be simultaneously, hopefully, decreasing my fat mass, which then keeps my metabolic rate high, keeps my muscle mass up there so I don't continue to lose strength. I'm combating that the signal from the body that says stop producing muscle. And also I keep everything else in check too, health-wise. You can also see that avoid stress fat. So at this age, we tend to see something called stress fat pop up a little bit more. So up until this age, our sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, are protecting us from getting a lot of fat around our waistline. As women, we tend to keep our fat in the hips, thighs, and butt. While men, it tends to go to outside the belly. Not really deep inside your belly, but get outside of it. At 40, though, your body's going to stop sending that signal to not have fat there. So you'll start to see that gather up a little bit more. This is also the time where we have stress hormones, also known as cortisol, pop up a little bit more too. And this aids in building up that visceral fat. So this is one time when you really need to focus on your diet as well. Because with all of this, as we talk about knee resistance training and gaining muscle, all the work that I do in the gym doesn't necessarily guarantee that I will see the results that I want if I'm not doing my work in the kitchen. So, it's equally half and half. I need to work and burn those calories and challenge my body physically, but I also need to be cognizant of what I'm putting in that body. So at this time, if you really start to notice that change in your weight or how your clothes fit, this could be why this is happening. How to combat this with exercise? We are going to follow just those normal ACSM recommendations that we talked about in the first few slides. So still trying to get that 150 minutes of cardio, 2 to 3 times per week of resistance training. But again, we want to look at that energy in versus energy out. So here you might not be able to get away with eating the same thing that you always have been because that metabolism is decreasing and your hormones are now working against you. So here's where you really want to be careful about what you are taking in. And then biggest thing, make it a routine. This is huge with this. So really, like we said, doing exercise once per week or very sporadically on and off isn't going to help me get to those goals. So I really want to make sure that I get in the habit of exercising because the more I do it, the easier it will be. And then the easier it is and more likely I am to continue that throughout the rest of my life. And that little comic at the bottom, you can see, I don't know how many of us relate to that, but having that pizza right after is fine every once in a while. If that's always our go-to, that's when we're going to start to see that stress fat. Moving on, we can't talk about aging without talking about menopause. So sorry, gentlemen, you're going to have to bear with me for a second, although this might affect you in your household too. But menopause is additional aging effects on top of what you already have. So we talked about that 1 to 2% of bone loss per year. Now with menopause, once you get that in there, that's going to be an additional 2 to 4% that we're losing. So our hormones are really fighting against us here. Some other physical changes you might see with this, it's going to be pelvic floor weakness, core stability, postures will go down and drain a little bit, balance, and then flexibility. So this isn't just you losing your marbles. This will be, nature is making these be some weaknesses with menopause. The benefits, though, of exercise are enormous. So you can improve and maintain your cardiovascular fitness with exercise. You can improve or preserve that muscle mass. This will assist in weight control and metabolism rates. You can improve or stabilize your bone density, decrease risk of other health-related conditions, which is big, and thereby your physical problems associated with those. And then you can also just help your psychological health and self-esteem. So especially during this time, you got a lot of hormones going on, a lot of emotions. Exercise can kind of be that outlet to help you stay sane. Exercise with menopause. So similar, cardiovascular, we recommend 30 minutes of weight-bearing activity 3 to 4 times per week. So by weight-bearing with cardiovascular, we mean something that will have a slight bit of impact. So walking, jogging, you can do group exercise classes, step classes, anything like that. A little bit less impact would be like the elliptical. That's not as much weight bearing, although you do get some of that in there. So that will help with bone density and your risk for COPD or heart disease. As far as resistance training, here you don't have to get very heavy at all. We're looking for very low load and higher reps. So now you're in that 10 to 20 range, anywhere in there that you like. And there have been numerous studies with bone density and exercise for women with menopause that, especially with a higher calcium diet, they were able to reduce some of the bone loss that occurs at this time. So we talked about the benefits of exercise again down there. There are numerous areas of specialty within exercise that you can see a trainer or even ask your doctor about if you are experiencing those side effects we talked about before, like pelvic floor weakness, core instability, and poor balance. Moving on to the next age, we are now at 50 years old. So at this time, up until here, we might be gaining a little bit more weight that we're not really sure of, but everything still feels like it's working okay. At this point is when we're going to start to feel those joints and muscle joint aches and pains. So maybe you like to play recreational basketball and now all of a sudden things are cracking and popping and they're not really working like they used to. Totally normal, but we do have to modify how we exercise a little bit. So this can make the exercise that you were doing before a little bit more difficult. Another complaint that we have is back pain and also sleep trouble. I read a lot about it. So goals, how can exercise combat that? Because this is our magic answer for most of these. The goals here are to protect the heart and your core. So resistance training, again, 2 to 3 times a week will be a major focus for you. You're looking to lift a weight that's heavy enough to achieve 10 to 15 reps per session. So this isn't, if you're doing a light weight and 10 and 15 reps is really easy, that might be a signal for you to go up. You really want to stimulate that muscle gain right now. You're looking at 20 to 60 minutes of aerobic activity, and that's looking at 3 to 5 days a week. Now, aerobic activity can be outside walking with your family too. It doesn't have to be, running a marathon or anything. It can be as low as 20 minutes or as high as 60, whatever fits your lifestyle the best. As we say that the goal is to protect the core, one thing that I see a lot, and in many research studies that I read for this presentation, is that our back problems are often related to a weak core. So if you find that you're often getting that low back pain with movement, or even you're trying to exercise and it's killing your back, you might just not be exercising or utilizing your core muscles in the way that you should be. So I would definitely consult an exercise specialist or a doctor if you are facing that. And then finally, sleep problems. They were also solved by resistance training in the studies that I read. Now, the ones that I looked at did not necessarily say the link as to why they think that is, but I can tell you that there was a positive correlation between sleep problems and resistance training. Moving on to 60 years of age. For this age, you are looking to focus on balance, strength, and prevention. You might start to be seeing the beginning signs of arthritis. So this is when those joint pains really are popping up. Maybe they're starting to even limit you in daily activities. Osteoporosis, which I'm sorry if I didn't mention this earlier on in the presentation, that's that decrease in bone strength that we were talking about before. So osteoporosis is the disease behind when you hear a lot about a lot of older people falling and breaking a hip or their bone just shattered as they get older. This is what osteoporosis is. It's known as brittle bone disease. So that's that bone loss that we're talking about. That starts to become more apparent at 60 years old. While it's been accumulating for the last several years, you don't always notice it or know that you have it until around 60 years old. And then of course, with that, as my bones are getting weaker, tendon and ligament weakness is also going to play a role into this. Excuse me. So how do we combat that? With exercise at 60 years old, you're looking at balance and strength prevention. So we really want to focus on gaining the appropriate musculature and strength so that we don't fall, especially if you are experiencing something like osteoporosis. So for that, I recommend incorporating balance work. This doesn't have to be done at the gym. This could be standing, on one leg while you're brushing your teeth or washing the dishes. You can put a chair in front of you to stabilize and to have your hands in case you feel like you're going to fall. But just start with a few seconds at a time and try to really work on standing on that single leg, or even double if that's a super weak point for you, and improving that balance. Along with that, a stronger leg is a more stable leg. So working on that leg strengthening through the resistance options that we've been talking about will help with that balance and coordination and help to maintain it. And then the biggest one here is flexibility. This is the age point when you start to also feel very tight. Like I said, those tendons and ligaments are getting more stiff, so are your muscles. So you want to really work on flexibility as well. I really recommend consulting an exercise specialist or a trainer. If you're part of MoveWell, you can ask any one of us, and we can help you. I mean, we even have chair exercises. If you were to Google that, I believe the American Heart Association has a lot of good resources on their website as well, for you or a family member that's experiencing this time period of life, and you can even just sit there and exercise and still stimulate those muscles. Finally, on the bottom there's exercise in a group environment. So at this point, it doesn't have to be super serious alone by yourself with headphones in the gym. You can go to group classes. Many gyms have a lot of them that are related towards age and aging, and you can go with friends and family and make it an event. So I really recommend having fun with it and using this time to enjoy exercise. Our last age bracket is going to be 70s and beyond. So at this point, major flags that we're starting to see pop up: increased risk for Alzheimer's, osteoporosis again, and then from that osteoporosis, broken bones from falling. Here's where you're really hearing about that, people falling and breaking bones. So again, how do we hit those red flags with exercise? Your goal here, to sustain that strength and the flexibility again. That's going to be even more of a key as you get into this age range. So focusing on that strength by resistance training, flexibility and balance. Group classes, again, like we said, going for a walk around the block, chair exercises at home, and resistance bands are a big one at this time too. So at this time, you might have some arthritis going on. Maybe it really hurts you to do any resistance training with weights or machines. So one thing I would recommend is resistance bands. These are a way that you can stimulate your muscles and signal that strength gain, but also it's a little bit easier on the joints because it takes a little additional load off there. So there are many exercises that you can do with that. Again, I would look online, talk to your doctor, maybe if you have a physical therapist or even a personal trainer at any of the gyms, and they can help provide you with some of those exercises. So now that we've gotten through the ages, I'd like to talk about some considerations that we did hit on in the beginning. So if you are new to strength training, you've not really ever done it before or at all, a few things you want to keep in mind. First off, I would not, because exercise is a stress and resistance training is a stress, you don't want to go all in and jump into doing it 7 days a week. So it's a better idea. I wouldn't go more than 3 times, especially starting off, because you don't want to overstress the body. You just want to provide enough stress that will signal a good adaptation. With that 3 times per week, you want to keep a rest day in between those. Again, we talked about that regeneration time period where you actually are getting stronger. And then also form. So it's very easy to do strength training incorrectly. We tend to have bad form if we don't know what we're doing, especially if you are newer to this. So I would really recommend, if you have somebody, if there's someone at your gym, to ask a trainer or a professional to watch your form. Most gyms, almost all of them, should have someone on site at all times that is certified, and they'd be more than happy to watch your form if you ask them. Another one that I tend to get asked is machines versus free weights. Really, one is not better than the other. It's more personal preference. Machines are a little bit more user-friendly and can control your motion a little bit more if you are newer to this and very novice, whereas free weights allow for a little bit more freedom, a little bit more room for error. Some people like each one better. I personally don't like machines as much as I do free weights, but it's really personal preference there. And then finally, a proper warm-up. You want to make sure that you are giving your body that little heads up that you are going to be doing some activity. So a proper warm-up is a great idea to really prepare your body for that exercise that's about to happen. Another red flag, or another thing to keep in mind, is that you shouldn't experience any pain while you're lifting weights. It will be uncomfortable in the way that exercise is typically, but it shouldn't be super painful as you're doing it. With that being said too, it's, especially if you are newer to resistance training or when you do switch up that program, it's normal to be sore. Soreness is just your body letting you know that you did work it and that it's changing. So soreness the next day doesn't mean that you did anything wrong or that you're injured. It just simply means that, there was that stress and stimulus and response. So I wouldn't panic on that. If it lasts more than 2 weeks, then maybe that's something you want to consider talking to somebody about. But if it's just a few days afterwards, that's totally normal. And just like we mentioned before in this presentation, exercise and the calories and the energy that you're expending is really important. It will help prevent a lot of those effects of age that we were talking about. But you do have to keep in mind of what you are taking in your body. My diet, if I'm smoking, drinking, things like that, those are all going to affect my bone and muscle health, as long as my metabolism and other hormone changes that we have. So really start to be, I like to encourage you to be cognizant of what you are putting in your body as well, because exercise is not the only end all be all. So as you begin this journey to start to incorporate this in whatever stage of life that you're in, I want you to know we do have some resources available. So as an employee, you have access to these options. The first one is a free option. It's a Move Well exercise consult. So with this, you would be able to sit down with somebody, talk about your current health, height, weight, things like that, and where might be a good idea for you to start. We can provide some exercises, we can provide some options, target heart rate to hit, things like that. This is a totally free service, and you don't even have to go in person if you want. You can do it by phone as well. Under that, you'll see a Move Well membership. This is a little bit of a plug because I do work there. But for employees, it's only $7 a month. You get access to 2 gyms and group exercise classes. And then in those gyms, we have a certified fitness specialist on staff at all time, only there for you guys. So we are there if you want someone to watch that form as you try a new exercise for a couple times. We have someone there. We do training sessions for free. So you would be able to meet with one of us, tell us your goals, and we can put together an exercise program. So you know exactly what resistance training or cardio exercises to do to help you reach the goals for what stage of life you're in. And maybe if you don't like the gym, you don't find yourself at home there, we do have group classes as well. If you don't choose to take us up on the Move Well membership, I'm certain that other gyms also have opportunities like that, but feel free to ask us around if you need any help in those areas. As we mentioned too, one thing I don't have on the slide, as an employee, you also have access to our Eat Well programs, which is access to our registered dietitians. So if maybe you're not struggling in the area of gym, but you find that what you're putting in your body could be affecting you more so, and that's your area of struggle, I would definitely look into that, because that is a free service that you have access to. These are my references that I used for this presentation. Are there any questions? Okay, the first question was about swimming. She asked if she has some arthritis and has been doing swimming for her cardio. She asked if this would be good enough to signal the weight-bearing activity, or if she needs to be doing more than that. I think that swimming is definitely a great option for this, especially with your arthritis pain. I think that as far as cardiovascularly, that is just as challenging as you need it to be, and it stimulates both growth and strength in your bones and muscles. To complement that, I would recommend adding in some resistance training so that you get that extra stimulus, that extra bout of weight-bearing activity that will really ensure you're strengthening those bones. Okay, our second question is from a member who is currently doing yoga 5 times a week and wants to know if that is enough of a strengthening and weight-bearing exercise, or if she should be doing more. I think that it definitely depends on the type of yoga that you're doing, because they vary in level of intensity. For example, yin yoga, I know, is solely stretching, so you're not really getting a lot of that strengthening stimulus. However, there are other types of yoga that are much more intense and do challenge that strength system. This member also asked if she should maybe drop it down from 5 times a week of yoga to doing water aerobics classes, and I think that is a great idea. I think that because this member doesn't find herself at home as much in the gym, these are wonderful options to get time on her feet. You're moving, you're stretching and protecting those joints, and also the water aerobics would provide that additional cardio stimulus that you don't necessarily get in the yoga class. Thank you for that question. This member also asked that she has been walking several times a week. I wanted to know if there's any way that she can add in some strength work with that walking. I think that walking is a wonderful weight-bearing activity. If you're walking outside and it's nice weather, a few good ways to add in some of the strength training so you don't have to go to the gym might be to walk, half a block, couple blocks, and then do some body weight squats. And then maybe walk a little bit longer and find a bench and do some push-ups on it. And these are great ways to incorporate some body weight strength exercises on that walk so that you don't have to go to the gym and spend extra time doing that there. Our next question is about resistance bands. So this member is asking, she has some weights at home and was looking at purchasing some resistance bands and wants to know if she's going to get the same amount out of her workout that she would with the weights. My answer to this is that bands are a great option to take the load off of your joints, and they do provide that strengthening stimulus. I don't think that they are often as challenging as free weights, although I really think it depends on the movement that you're doing. So there are some movements that it's harder to do with bands and make them challenging. For example, a row where you're pulling it in closer to your body and working your back. I think that is a great way to incorporate some bands, and the band makes it easier on your elbow than say a free weight would. However, there are other exercises that a free weight might be more suitable for. So I would consider the bands for sure. I think they're a great option, but maybe use some of both in your exercise program. Okay, our next question came from a participant who said she's been doing her elliptical work the same 30 minutes every time that she does it, and really reach that plateau and stop getting some of the changes out of it. So she's not providing that stimulus anymore. She wants to know what there is to do to vary it up and how she could get a better workout out of this. For this, I would say there are multiple ways that you can change exercise and vary it to make it harder or easier for both resistance training and cardio. If we look at cardio, for example, and resistance training, the first way is to manipulate the volume. So for weight training, this might be doing more sets or reps of things. For cardio, this could just be longer duration for time. So instead of doing my normal 30 minutes, I could increase that to 60 minutes, which would be another additional stimulus. The second way that we could do it is by manipulating the intensity. If we're talking resistance training, this could be lifting a heavier weight. If you're talking cardio, this might be increasing the speed or the resistance that you're going at and increasing it that way. My favorite way to recommend changing up cardio is by doing intervals though. So this, you could keep that same or change at resistance, but essentially what you would be doing is going for a harder pace and then an easier pace. Now a harder pace and easier pace is individual depending on the person. Maybe if I am walking as my easy pace, I could just go to a faster walk for my harder pace and do, easy for a minute and harder for 30 seconds. If I'm more of a jogger, I could jog for a minute and run harder for 30 seconds. This can go to machines as well. So if I'm riding the bike or bike outside, I can pedal really fast for 30 seconds and then take it easier for a minute. This could also be on the elliptical as well, as you had asked. So this provides a way to increase my heart rate and then bring it back down and change that level of heart rate. And you can go for the same 30 minutes, but it's a different stimulus. You can progress this over time. Maybe instead of a minute of rest to 30 seconds of going harder, you could do 30 seconds to 30 seconds. And that can continue to progress, just making it harder with having less rest time or that easier pace. All right, another question that we have is regarding that stress fat. So the sudden increase in belly fat that we start to see around 40 to 50 years old. What are the recommendations for that? I would say just as the ACSM recommendations were in the beginning of the PowerPoint, I would stick with those for your workouts. And if you're not finding improvement with that, this is where it really starts to tackle the calories in, what you're taking into your body. Just as we said, the exercise is going to be important, equally important to factor in what you're taking in. That will be almost more important than the exercise you're doing in regarding that belly